I do want to talk about the chaos and the dysfunction in Congress right now. As you know, Israel is at war, a government shutdown is looming. The House right now doesn't have a speaker. So, how does all of this chaos affect Congress supporting Israel?
Well, right now, there's enough money in the pipeline that President Biden can resupply Israel, but we do need to pass supplemental aid for Israel the next week or two. Republicans should reach out, and I know that we're ready to talk to any group of Republicans or any Republican leader about an agreement as to how to run the House in a bipartisan way. Unfortunately, right now, the most hard line and most extreme of all the Republican candidates for Speaker is trying to rally Republican support by saying, vote for me. Otherwise, we'd have to cut a reasonable deal with Democrats. And unfortunately, so many of the Republicans would rather have their worst possible speaker than to get a good speaker working along with Democrats.
Would you support Democrats joining Republicans to just get a speaker over the finish line, regardless of who it is, even who I think you're describing Jim Jordan right now? So would you support Jim Jordan being speaker, or is that a non-starter for you?
Jim Jordan would be among the worst speakers we could have. The only thing good about it is it's good politics for Democrats, because if he becomes the face of the Republican House of Representatives, while Donald Trump is the face of the Republican Party, I think a lot of people will vote for Democrats. But in terms of providing governance, which is why we're here, Jim Jordan would be a disaster. I think Democrats are ready to be junior partners to any group of Republicans or the Republicans overall in running the House in an efficient and bipartisan way. Unfortunately, no Republican, to my knowledge, has reached out to us on that.
I do want to talk about this speaker fight just a little bit more, because there have been a lot of names floated around. Even one Republican was talking to a reporter and was like, hey, maybe I'd vote for you for speaker. That's kind of where we're at right now. So is there any Republican, maybe a more moderate one, that if that name was brought to the table, you would support?
It's got to be not just the person, but the process, how we staff the Rules Committee. And what's especially important to me is if the Senate passes an appropriations bill necessary to keep the government open, that bill gets an up or down vote on the floor of the House. To me, that heck, even Jim Jordan would be, with that as a rule, would be an improvement over where we are now. I could see President George W. Bush serving as Speaker of the House. He could come back and obviously I'm not a real fan of how the Iraq War went, but I would think that any reasonable Republican would be somebody that Democrats could work with if it was part of a system where you didn't have five of the most extreme Republicans blocking important legislation and saying, if you bring that to the floor for a vote, will knock you out of your speakership. And that's what happened, actually. Kevin McCarthy brought, finally, after exhausting all the alternatives, a reasonable continuing resolution to provide money to fund the government through November 17th, and they bounced him for that reason. So we've got to have a system where the next speaker is obligated to bring reasonable appropriations bills to the floor. Bills, for example, that have already passed the Senate.
You just said a name that I didn't even know was in the speaker realm, and that was former President George W. Bush. A, is that someone you would support? And B, where are we in this fight? Are we close to a resolution?
Three very important Republican members announced their support for Jim Jordan when they said they wouldn't earlier. And so he does have a bit of momentum, but there were 55 who were against him last week. And so now he's down to 52. He can only afford to lose three or four. As to George W. Bush, I pick him as a traditional Republican who isn't doing anything right now. Mitt Romney also comes to mind, but he's got a Senate seat to fill for a while. And again, it's not the person, it's the program. And if the program is to say that if a bill passes the Senate we'll get an up or down vote on it in the House. And that would be more important to me than the personality.